And another point that Rothbard made in that book that really struck with me is once you have this institutionalized aggression against private property, which is, taxation, inflation, et cetera, you actually bifurcate society into the taxpayers, the people paying, the people having their property predated, and then the people receiving the value from that predation of private property, the tax receivers, I think Roth calls them. So it's you're making an inherently a society that cannot be unified by definition, right? Because you've created this schism, this economic or even a moral, I guess, schism between them just by having asymmetric rules. So the ideal state would be to have these universalized rules, level playing field, if you will, that everyone just plays by.
Well, and remember, the whole purpose of these rules is to allow conflict to be avoided. Okay.
Right.
So any rule that you propose that generates conflict is contrary to the purpose of such rules. So if you set up arbitrary classes of people, that is generating conflict, not allowing conflict to be solved. Look, so the basic thing is this: if you think about the context, some people criticize Hoppe's argumentation ethics by saying something like, "Well, obviously, his theory is not right because you could imagine someone who has a slave and sits down and has an argument with him one night. So it's possible to argue with your slave, and he's still a slave." But of course, that's not Hoppe's argument. Hoppe's argument is that you can't justify this. So if the slave owner is holding a slave, he can have a conversation with them, but he's contradicting himself the whole time because for the duration of the argument, he's giving the slave some kind of respect and bodily autonomy at the same time that he's claiming to own the slave's body. So he's basically schizophrenic or incoherent the entire time. Now, what Hoppe's argument is that when you propose a norm, it has to be universalizable, which just means you have to give reasons. But that doesn't mean everyone has to be treated the same. You can treat people differently as long as you have an adequate reason. And that is why you have the right to self-defense. So you do have the right to use someone's body without their express consent if they're committing aggression against you. Like if someone's attacking me, I've got the right to hurt his body to make him stop, even though he objects to that, right? So the argument would be the same argument that I have a right to my body, which implies that I've got the right to defend it, which implies that someone loses the right to their body when they start attacking me and they're committing an act of aggression. So you could argue with a slave, and it could be coherent if the slave was justly enslaved. So, for example, if someone, some guy breaks into your house, they're killing all your family members, and you catch the guy and you subdue him and you tie him down. Let's say you tie him down for a couple of days until you decide what to do with him. I mean, he's basically your slave during that time, and you might even enslave him to make him pay back, to make him pay restitution, or you might even kill him to punish him for what he did. You're treating him like a means, or like your property. But if you sat down and had an argument with them, you could justify that. You wouldn't be incoherent because you're not saying that you're treating likes unalike. You're treating unalikes unalike, right? So that's the question. But if, for example, if I said, well, I'm a white guy and I'm enslaving you because you're a black guy, the question is, and that is a difference, but is it a relevant difference, right? I would say it's a relevant difference if I'm enslaving you because you committed aggression and I didn't commit aggression, right? So, and it's relevant because when I enslave you, I'm using force. And the fact that you were an aggressor meant you use force. So it's force against force. So it's relevant, clearly. This is what I argue in detail in my estoppel theory of rights, which you can find on my website. But if someone is merely a different age or sex or ethnicity, or social status from you, that is not a relevant difference, because whenever you make an argument in discourse, you're always implicitly claiming rights for yourself, always. So you're always basically claiming some kind of self-ownership and property rights for yourself, because you're claiming your bodily autonomy rights and you're claiming enough property rights to survive, to get there in the first place, right? Like the material resources you use to live and to get there, and that you're standing on while you're having the argument. So you're claiming a certain set of rights for yourself. But the only thing we know about you in abstract is that you're a human actor. You're an intelligent, conscious human actor. And so you must be attributing rights to yourself for those reasons. If you're some kind of weird racist, you could say, well, because I'm a white man, I'm claiming a white man's rights or something like that. But you have to give a reason for that. Like, because you're actually having an argument with another person. So they're on the same level with you in terms of rational discourse and communication. Why are you trying to, you don't try to justify your rights to a cricket. You only do it to things
Right.
that you think can respond to you in kind. So you're already admitting that this other person, the other participant in discourse, is similar to you in some respects. So the first level of assumptions that your participant could say, well, you're saying you have rights and you're denying them to me, but for whatever reasons you have rights, I have them too, because we're both similar.
Mhm.
And you would say, well, no, we are different. We have different skin color. It's like, yeah, but wait,
not
yeah,
relevant.
right. So,
Yeah.
so I'm black. Maybe I own you because you're white.
Hmm.
If mere difference means you own the other person, then that doesn't solve conflict. It's not a type of rule grounded in the nature of things. So you made me think of this because you said the word arbitrary. You can't have arbitrary distinctions. They have to be grounded in the nature of thing, and they have to be relevant and germane to the topic under discussion. So that's why only an act of aggression can justify treating someone as a means against their consent. But if someone has not done that, then you have no grounds for treating them differently than the rights you claim for yourself.
Yeah, brilliantly said. This whole idea of engaging in discourse with another is kind of like an implicit admission, right? That you both possess rationality, that you're engaging
Yes.
with someone
Yes.
on the rational level. To even speak to someone and wait for a response is an admission that they possess a similar faculty.
Yes.
And correct me if I'm wrong here, but there's basically, so there is a justification for aggression, but there's no justification for aggression other than in self-defense, right? Someone would have to initiate it first.
I wouldn't call it aggression then. I mean, I think the word aggression should be reserved for the use of unconsented to or that's why Randians and libertarians talk about the non-aggression principle means you can't initiate the use of force. Mm-hmm. So what I would say is force can be used against someone without their permission if they commit aggression. But in that case, it's not aggression. It's what I would call self-defense, or the more general term is responsive force. So the idea is that initiated force is never justified, but force in response to initiated force or aggression is or can be justified as long as it's proportionate and contextually relevant. Right. Now, but I would say that even that is sort of an imprecise way of stating. The more general rule would be that property rights means that the owner has the right to consent or to deny consent to others to use that resource. So consent is the ultimate issue. You alluded to that with your word voluntary. Mm-hmm. I think voluntary is, some libertarians say they're voluntarious, and I appreciate the what they're getting at there. But as a technical matter, I think the word consent is better than voluntary, because consent recognizes your property rights. Voluntary just means you chose to do the action. So in a technical sense, like just the way the words work and the way the law works, if someone coerces you, your actions are still voluntary. Like you're responding to the limited choice you've been given. Like if someone says, "Give me your wallet or I'm going to blow your head off," and you hand the wallet, it's not an involuntary act. Like if you have a seizure or something, it's a voluntary act. It's just that it's coerced. So I would say it's not consensual, because the consent is not meaningful because you've been coerced. So that's the key thing. So I would say, if I was going to rename libertarianism, I would call it consensualism instead of voluntarism. Although that's just a quibble or a nitpick, but
but that's a subtle distinction that does make a lot of sense, especially in that example you just gave with the seizure. That would be something that's involuntary, right?
Involuntary, right.
Just like when the doctor taps your knee with a hammer and your leg kicks out, that's a behavior, not an action, right?
Exactly. That's what gets to the dualism thing. Now, I do think most libertarians, when they say voluntary, what they mean is
consensual. Yeah.
When they say that was involuntary, what they mean is you were coerced.
Mhm.
But just
Yeah.
just like force is not always wrong if it's in response to aggression, coercion is not always wrong. Just like violence is not, because coercion simply means to use force to compel someone to do something. But
Mhm.
again, if someone is trespassing on my property, I might coerce him into leaving.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with it.
But uninitiated coercion
Exactly.
cannot be justified.
Yeah, aggressive. I mean, if it's aggression, that's the problem. If it's yeah. So if you coerce someone, if you threaten someone, and they haven't committed aggression against you, then that's when it becomes unjustified.